Okay, so today we're going to be going through a few different things when it comes to how to handle scales. A lot of you deal with scales, and so I'm going to work you through start to finish how to handle a scale in terms of calculating, in terms of reverse coding, reverse worded questions, calculating reliability, and calculating the mean. So here, for example, we have a 4-item extroversion scale. This is in variable view where we have 4 items to measure extroversion. In general, I'm the life of the party, talk to a lot of different people at parties, don't talk a lot, and keep to the background. You can see how these two questions are the reverse of these two questions. These two questions measure high extroversion, these two questions measure low extroversion. Before I combine these together into a mean, I have to reverse these two in order to make sure that my data is going to work, right? So I need to take these and flip around the coding. Now, what I'm going to do is just work for extroversion as a scale. I also have 2 other scales. I have 4 items for conscientiousness and 6 items for optimism, but I'm just going to be focused on these 4 right now, just to avoid muddying the waters. So I treat each scale independently, and I do all this work, once again, in pieces, so I wouldn't treat all of these all at once. So the first thing I need to do is identify which of my items are reversed. Now, usually, if you take an original scale, it should identify them with the letter R's. You can always look through and see how you're supposed to code them. It should have instructions. But you can always use your common sense. So you can see how these measure a lack of extroversion. So these would be the ones I identify as reversed. The next step you need to do is see what range you're dealing with. You could take a look at the original question and how it was worded, or you could just take a look at the numbers here. You can see that my numbers range from 1 to 5, so this is a 1 to 5 point scale. Usually they're 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 9, and you can very easily eyeball to see which numbers you have to work with. In this particular case, it's a 1 to 5 point scale. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 flipped items. So right now, for example, this person answered a 1 on extroversion 3. I want that to represent their true score on high extroversion. I want that 1 to become a 5. This person answered a 4. I want that 4 to become a 2. I want to take all of these and flip them around. Now, it's going to be a whole lot easier to let the system do it for you rather than do it all yourself. And there's a lot more room for error when you do it yourself. So I'm going to flip around the scores on these so that the 1s become a 5, the 4s become a 2, the 2s become a 4, the 5s become a 1, and so on and so forth. So here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to transform, recode into different variables. You don't want to do this because it writes over the old variables, and sometimes you forget which ones you flipped and you flip them back, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose. I also feel really uncomfortable coding over existing data. I always like to create new variables and keep the original variables the way that they are. So I'm going to deal with these 2 variables, extroversion 3 and extroversion 4. I'm going to call it something new. I'm going to call it something that reminds me that I've reversed it. So I like to put an R in front of the name. And keep the numbers and everything else the same so that I know it's a reversed version of that particular item. This works for my brain. Your brain might work differently, but I think having a little reminder that you've reversed it and then having the original item name here will help keep track of that. And then you get into old and new values. In this particular case, this is a 5-point scale, so I want my 1s to become a 5. I want my 2s to become a 4. I need to keep it at a 3. You want to make sure to put that in, otherwise it'll treat all the 3s as if they're missing, which is not what you want. You can double check your work, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that looks great. All right, now it has created 2 new variables. Sometimes when people do this, they'll go, did I do it? Because it doesn't show up as anything. But if you look over here, I've created new variables. And furthermore, I was successful. So you can see over here, extroversion 3 for this person was 1, and extroversion 4 was 1. Those numbers have now been flipped to 5 and 5. So you can see that this more accurately reflects the fact that they actually are very extroverted. They had a 5 on these first 2, so it makes sense that they have a 5 on these other ones as well. They're just a very extroverted person. So now what we're going to do, now that we've properly flipped around our scale, is we're going to go ahead and generate our Chromevox Alpha reliability. I'm going to do that by going to Analyze, Scale, Reliability Analysis. This is to make sure I have good items in my scale that all correlate well with one another. As we went through in Intro to Design and in Statistics, it's important to do this particular factor to make sure that you don't have any items that are dragging you down. Now this is important. I'm going to put in my original items, and then I'm going to put in my reversed items instead of item 3 and item 4. I'm going to put in reversed item 3 and reversed item 4. Hopefully that makes sense to you, but you want to make sure to put in the reversed version of these items. We're going to click on a few things in order to give us all the information we need. And then it's going to generate a reliability. Now, this is the Chromevox alpha that we report for the reliability of our scale. As a reminder, 0.8 or higher is considered adequate reliability. I'd say if it's 0.5 or 0.6, that's still not a deal breaker. If it's a really weird number or really, really, really small, that's a problem, and you might have included the wrong items, or you might have forgotten to reverse an item, which could make it weird. You can always ask me for help if you need to troubleshoot with this. This lets you know the different items in the scale and if there's any bad ones. So for example, if you get a really, really, really low number over here, I would first troubleshoot by looking over here to see if any of the items look like they are dragging down the reliability. This is a decent reliability. I don't need to fiddle with this at all. All 4 of these items work as a measure of extroversion. They all correlate well with one another. None of them are showing that they would drag down my reliability. So I am fine with keeping all 4 of these in the scale. And once again, I would report this reliability as part of my materials in my method section of my paper. The last thing I need to do in order to get this to be something I can work with is to create a mean that represents the average of these 4 items. So in order to do that, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to call it mean extroversion, something that makes a lot of intuitive sense. I'm going to ask it to compute the mean by going to function group, all, and then scrolling down to mean. And then I'm going to ask it to provide the mean of original item 1, separated by comma, original item 2, and reverse items 3 and 4. If you had any items, you would not include them in the mean when you calculate your mean. But all of my items are good, so I'm going to keep all of them in there. And once again, if you go into your variables, you can see how you created mean extroversion. This is the average of those 4 items. This is what you're going to do things with that are more fun. You can correlate this with other things. You can perform a median split on it. You can do all sorts of things with this particular variable. But this is what you need to get to in order to be able to perform some basic analyses. So this is your starting place. Once again, in this video, we went through how to reverse code, reverse worded items, how to calculate Chromevox alpha reliability, and how to average together into a mean.